In this episode of Brupeg, I go grey. I set fire to the hatch. I put the fire out with the hose. I drill a hole that was already there. Jess gets in a fight with a chicken. And I don't know how to use a spanner. We're a Kiwi couple living in Australia who brought a 57-foot steel trawler after she sunk in a flood and was pulled from the sea. We're now bringing her back to life. We're on to the finishing jobs after working on her for the last 6 years to refit and get her ready for launch as soon as possible. Brupeg is rebuilt by us with volunteers funded by Patreons and viewers, and we spend every cent we have to make sure that she's ready. She's fueled by veggie oil, diesel, solar and wind power to do research, projects and expeditions to remote places like Antarctica and the Northwest Passage. She'll be crewed by supporters from around the world. Welcome aboard. As Jess said last episode, we need to start making these acrylic hatches. Now, the acrylic itself is strong enough on its own to handle the pressure of the water. They build aquariums out of this sort of stuff, and this is thicker than what the guy said that we needed to use, so we went a bit over. However, he did say that they crack from edges that aren't prepared right. So if you cut, say, around this line and you don't prepare the edge correctly, or if you don't countersink these holes, or if you drill all the way through in one go rather than drill halfway through, flip it over and drill from the other side, there's a few different tricks you have to do to basically make sure the edges don't cause you any dramas. Now, these are our original steel hatches. We're going to chop a middle section out of this, and then the rim, the steel rim, is basically going to be around this here. Now, I'm going to drill these holes here slightly oversized, and my plan is that way this will be glued to this. It will do the location on the bolts. Theoretically, this plastic will never touch steel, so this will be glued onto the top. The bolts will go through and use the steel to locate, not the plastic, and the plastic will be sandwiched between 3mm nitrile rubber gasket onto the actual tank. What I've done is basically clean the paint off around where the cut or the rim is going to be. So we're going to bring the rim in about sort of 3 inches. So don't need to worry about this paint, but we do need this flat over here. And I've cleaned the paint off the edge. What I need to do now is go around and mark where we're going to be putting our rim. So I want it to be consistent and even right the way around. So I've made a little jig, just a bit of timber with a flat edge on one side and then a uniform distance. So I'll put my pen in the middle. If I just move all the way around like that, I'm going to get the same distance right the way around. Now, one thing I do need to do, this has to be perfectly flat, so I will probably sandblast this to get rid of any rubbish on this side. The other side I'm happy that I've sort of skimmed and actually used some of the paint as a filler, because this is the inside of the tank essentially. And when I had to take have a look around here, when I had to take it off with the saw, I damaged it. There's pretty much no way of avoiding that. But I do need to fill these garks up, so I have a plan for that. I'll show you that in a sec. But that's okay for the inside. This paint is extraordinarily thick, so that's 2 layers, and it's probably a good 1.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters, high. This side here does have to be pretty flat though. So the reason being is I'm going to actually run a router around this edge as a template to cut that shape. And then we're going to use these holes. This is going to be glued to the plastic, and then these holes are going to be our location holes. And by using the nitrile rubber as our gasket rather than a liquid like a sealant type thing, we're not going to have the same issues we had getting it off. The reason we went with the liquid sealant last time is we just couldn't find a supplier for nitrile rubber. That's the normal thing. That's what everyone else uses on the trawlers here, and that's what we would have liked to have used, but we couldn't find any. So at the time we used a food grade sealant. It was absolutely bulletproof, so it wouldn't have leaked, but it wasn't the easiest of things to have used. We don't have to do that now. We've got our rubber, so we can make a gasket that's going to be easy, and when we have to take this off in the future, it's literally a case of unbolt it and it'll come out. I reckon that'll do nicely.
My love for the ocean, I would be long gone by now. It's some kind of devotion that brings me down.
We need 2 of these things. So we bloody well went and made 2. It's happening. It's changing colour.
You never get a perfect edge when you freehand plasma cut something. It was pretty good, but I just wanted to make it awesome, so we got the grinder in there and ripped off any high spots. This footage is actual speed as well. Like, I don't want you thinking that I fast forwarded this to make it quick or anything.
Both of these have had the inside rim cleaned up. I've gone around with a grinder and basically 45 both edges, and then straightened out any of the garks that was left by the plasma in here, so it's nice and sort of quite straight. I've also done the same on the edge here because I need that for my template for the outside for the router. Next job, go through and sandblast these up so that we can get the paint on these. But you can sort of see here any of the dimples that were left from like years ago rust type thing have all been filled up by that epoxy. It's amazing stuff, really, really thick. That's all come off. We're going to basically give this a skim with a blaster so we can get a new layer of paint on. That side is just an old single pack, so that'll rip off real fast. So we get those done, then we can get them onto the plastic, cut the plastic out.
First coat on the hull. We have no idea what colour he's gone with for the top coat.
When I walk all over you, and your blood is in the water, you go straight through my heart, through my
You need to clean out the paint from inside the holes on the hatch rims. Easiest way is just to throw a 16mm drill down each hole.
What I need to do is clamp the steel to the acrylic somehow, whether I use, you know, G clamps or F clamps, whatever they're called. One of the thoughts I'm having though is that I need to lift this whole thing off the table so that I can run a router around it. I can't have the router hitting the table. So I was thinking, okay, well I'll sit it on a piece of wood. But I don't think that's going to work either, because I'm going to have to move the clamps halfway through the job and then spin it around and clamp it all back down, and that's going to make the whole thing move. I do, however, have to put pilot holes in every single one of these so that I can drill with the 16mm drill halfway through and then halfway through. I'll show you what that means in a second. But I have to put a pilot hole all the way through. What I'm thinking, put the pilot hole through and use that to put a 3mm bolt in, or a 4mm bolt, something that doesn't have to have any strength, it just has to locate it so it won't move. If I do that at the top and at the bottom, maybe one on either side, I think that might be our solution. So I'm going to use the big one to find the center. I'm just going to touch each one to get the center of the hole. Then I'm going to use the small drill to pilot it. So there you go, that's perfectly in the middle of that hole.
You're going to use it as a washer? Like,
yeah.
The ginormous washer.
Yeah.
Ginormous.
It's going to be so strong. Look how thick it is. Look at the washer on it. Like,
yeah. I just want one washer.
Yeah.
But there's many bolts, sir. I don't care, one washer.
One washer on me.
It's that time of the evening when Damien's starting to repeat things.
Comment
on
shit. What we've done is just chucked a couple of 4mm bolts through this to essentially bolt the steel onto the plastic so that it won't move. I'm going to flip this over and sit it on the steel face, and then I can run my router using the edge of this as a template. I can run my router around this and get the perfect cutout for it. So I think that's a simple enough way to make it work. That's good enough. This bloody amazing router and set was a direct result of Peter Bentley. You lovely man, you. This bearing at the bottom is the exact same diameter as the two blades. You might be able to see there. So they, if I can maybe show it, go vertical, you can sort of see that it's bang on. Diameter, that one for that one. What we need to do is run this bearing around the steel rim, and then the hatch gets cut to be a perfect match of the outside of that steel rim. So this is our routing template, and this is our workpiece to cut. And this is just a big flat cutting piece. It's called a flush trim, and it does exactly what it says. It trims things flush. So to test that you've got it set right, put your router up against your workpiece. When you come down the bottom, you can see the bearing. This bearing here is basically a line that it's gonna, when I push in, it's going to hit that steel. I want to make sure the bearing's not lower than the steel or too high or anything like that. I'm just basically getting a height measurement. But what you also have to do is make sure that the blades go off the edge of the workpiece, in this case the plastic. I probably want to make a slight adjustment, so flick that, and then I can adjust this router up and down. Oh, it's a bit hard that way around. Sorry. So I'm actually just moving this further that way. I want to make sure that the blades don't hang too far down, just in case they start to nip the metal. I don't want that to be the case. So there, that's as far as I'd want to go. We'll lock that up. Right, we're ready to go. Jess wanted an action shot, and that's what she got. This is a good example. Can you see there's chips just on the outside of the drill hole there? When I drilled that, I just pushed straight through with a 4mm drill, and it's basically punched this corner out, so it's sort of chipped, and that's where a crack will start. That's what you shouldn't do when you're working with acrylic. I knew that this would happen. It's only a 4mm drill, I wasn't too worried. This is just a center hole essentially. I'm going to be putting a 16mm hole down here. One of the careful things you have to do is basically put a center hole in like this, and then drill halfway through this side, halfway through the other side, and then countersink both sides so that you end up with no chance of this sort of rubbish happening where you've punched a drill all the way through. Right, now that we've got our edge trimmed to the same proportions as our steel rim down on the ground there, what we need to do is go through and radius top corner and bottom corner so that we don't have any sort of sharp edges or anything. Even though this is going to be sandwiched between steel and rubber, we just need to essentially remove any possible chance that we can have a crack forming on that edge. So I need a radius top and bottom, and this is the smallest radius I've got. It's 6.4mm, a quarter inch. I've got to do bottom as well, so it'll be quite rounded. The other option I have is a 45, where I take, like, say 3mm off, and it's just a 45mm cut.
What did the guy say?
He said radius it, and that's the smallest radius I've got. I'm thinking it's acceptable, isn't it? Otherwise I have to go and buy a tool that's smaller.
I think you have to radius. If that's the smallest you've got, that's what we've got to do.
Alright, cool.
What are you worried about? That it'll take too much off?
Just that it's too big. Like, the radius is too big, but I don't really have a choice. It's the smallest one I got. I'm not doing the holes. I've got a countersink tool for those.
I think just go for it, eh?
Alright, I'll do them now.
Worst case scenario, start again.
Yeah, true.
Wow, okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it looks amazing.
I gotta do top and bottom, but yeah, that's what it sort of comes up like.
If I'm out of line, but there's some words that I just want to say to put it on straight.
I found some burrs had transferred from the steel onto the plastic when I used it as a template, so using the belt sander we can clean those up, get it nice and smooth, ready to radius it properly.
It's just you're getting a wobbly, see it's not quite even. See it's wider there than it is there. That was the imperfections of the steel coming through, so I just put do that sand, then I can, it takes the imperfections out and I can just get a smoother line.
Now's the time to reap what I've sown. Your words echoing in every...
Come up nice, eh?
So the point is to make sure it's really rounded.
Yeah, so basically cracks form on an edge. So sharp edges form cracks much easier than rounded edges. So if you round all the edges, you've got a significantly more chance of protecting it from a crack ever starting. Have a look at this, right? So imagine that edge, it doesn't take much to hit it, and you're gonna get a crack. It takes more than that. But look at that, you can already start to see the damage just from a little few knocks. This is a rounded edge. It's just, there's nothing. So it's just, it's a simple thing, but it makes it much easier to protect. So that should be pretty close to fitting. Perfect. Look at that. Oh, that'll do. That's the size of our window, basically. So what we have to do now is transfer these 16mm holes into the plastic below, but I want to do the holes in the plastic 18mm. I don't know what the best way of cutting these are. I've got a few drill bits that I could use, and he actually said to use a blunt drill bit, so...
Oh, why?
I don't know, maybe I'm just guessing, but maybe if you've got too much of a sharp cutting point on it, maybe it forms cracks. I don't know, guessing, and if you've got more of a blunt one, maybe it kind of abrades it rather than cuts it. I don't know, just a guess, but my thought is I don't have an 18mm drill bit. I've got a 17mm and then a 25, so it's a wee bit of a jump, but I do have an 18mm annular cutter, so I'm kind of wondering if I could do it with a mag drill. Can you see in there, you've got those little burrs forming? It's overheating it.
That's what I was
It's
wondering.
getting too hot.
Yeah.
So it might have to go slower. We're through. I just want to see how much, if it's punched through much.
Oh, that's right, you're supposed to go one side and then the other side, eh?
Yeah. Right, see that? See how it's cracking all the way around the edge?
Yeah, hence why he's saying do one then the other.
One the other. So let's do another hole and we'll do one the other.
So is the top okay?
I'd say the top will be alright. Yeah, look at that, the top's beautiful. So hence, if you drill through on both sides, you're always getting two tops rather than a top and a bottom.
Yeah.
So let's
I can see it's still a risk though, isn't it, for a fracture or...
yeah, well I think it's about speed. I was probably pushing a bit too hard.
Yeah.
Like, where are we? So you can see about there, it's starting to get a bit hot and it's starting to get melting it. I think if I can control the speed and do two tops rather than a top and a bottom, I think we'll be alright. And the only way to do that is to put a centre drill through it so that the mag drill centre will go down and through it. Yeah, it'll fit.
This is what the mag drill leaves if you don't use the centering piece. You get these little plugs of metal or wood, or in this case plastic. It's basically just the inside of the circle you've just cut out, and you poke it out with this hole at the back.
Hello, beautiful. You coming to say hello? Hi, handsome. Oh, look at you, so gorgeous. What are you doing, walking around? You're such a yard cat, aren't you? Yeah. Hey, you need a cuddle?
Let's try all that again. I've put a 5.5mm pilot hole. I've put the centre into my mag drill. You can sort of see that little pointed piece. There you go. Oh, look at that. What I plan to do is basically drill halfway through from the top, flip it over, and I'll drill halfway through from the other side, and we'll see how it turns out. let's compare them. This is the first that we did. You can see this is the top, and then this is the bottom. If I spin it around, you might be able to see on that edge, you can see it's cracked and it's sort of broken away. This is the second one that I've just drilled. So let's take that wrapper off and see what it's like. I don't know if this was the first or second side I drilled, doesn't really matter. Right. Look at that, perfect. The edge is sweet. You can see there's a wee bit of sort of halfway up. You can kind of see it where it's broken through, but I don't think there's any way of avoiding that. But it's also in the middle as well, which means that it's harder for it to actually like crack, keep going out from there, because it would have to delaminate the acrylic. I think we'll go with that, and then we'll countersink them, and that's probably going to be us finished.
I've said it many times, I know I would change my ways, I know for sure.
There we go. I think that's going to work. I think if we can lock it up tight with some bolts, I can then probably have a better shot at it with my 16mm drill and get a better centre going on.
Yes, definitely. Because you've got 3 points, right?
Yeah, and it won't move with the 3 points holding it. What I'm thinking, this is a 16mm bit with a 16mm hole, so this basically self-centres, like it locates where it needs to be. But I can always, this has been sharpened a million times and I can resharpen it again, but what I'm thinking is actually butchering it a wee bit so that it's got a small point on it.
Oh, right.
So it'll be a centering point, if that makes sense. And then I'll know that I'll have a centered 16mm hole all the way through.
So this is
16mm. It's perfect for these holes, which is what I want. So it'll create a center hole whilst locating inside the metal 16mm hole. I just want to pop a center hole in, and then I'll go all the way through with the 5.5mm drill bit.
Okay.
Because that's the right diameter for the mag drill.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a process, but I think we can do it if we use this to use it as the center.
Look away if you don't want to see a 16mm drill bit get butchered.
So I've just butchered up a 16mm drill bit. This is going to self-center in these holes, but as you can sort of see, I've just created a lump in the middle, and as that spins round, that's going to essentially burn a centered hole perfectly in the middle of these metal holes that we have to locate onto the plastic. So let's just give it a shot. There we go. Need to go a bit deeper, but it'll work. Look at that, perfect.
We got nothing to be scared of. I'd rather be with you than by myself. Not always in your hand.
Oops.
Probably need to
Not drill into my rug.
bolt this on, can't we?
Right, said Fred, here's my plan. The centre hole in this one here is not in the centre, so it's not going to work. Can't use it as a centre hole. This is a 16mm hole in the steel, and I need an 18mm hole in the plastic. So I can't just plunge through and, you know, manky that out, because I'm going to destroy the steel. So I went and bought a 16mm annular cutter. What I'm going to do is plunge down with this through this hole here, using that as my guide. I'll plunge down through really, really delicately all the way through. I'm not going to be able to drill it from both sides, so I will get some cracking, etc. on the other side. However, it's 16mm. We have to go to 18mm. So once I've got a 16mm, essentially centre hole all the way through that's perfect to this one here, what I'm going to do then is flip the plastic over, put the 16mm in, get everything lined up so that it's perfect, and then get the 18 and start plunging through. So I'm going to use this as my centre drill. Some caveats for using a mag drill. They don't like 6mm steel. It's not very thick, therefore you don't get a lot of magnetism holding the base, the magnetic base here down to the steel. They much prefer sort of 10mm or above. 20mm is really good. However, we don't have the choice. We're going to be running on this 6mm. What I've done is I've centered the annular cutter and then turn the magnet on, so I should be pretty good with buzzing down there.
Pay close attention to the cutter, watch it jump as I'm drilling.
Well, that's new. I don't know why, but it's basically shattering it. I've never seen that happen so far with an annular. The 18 was cutting it absolutely perfect, and I don't know why on earth this one's going crazy. I think I know what's going on. The hole that's in there right now is a 4mm hole, and it's not centered, it's slightly off to one side, and I think as the cutting teeth are going past it, it's hitting it and basically shattering off the edge of it. And I think that's making the whole thing chatter, which is making the whole thing jiggle around in the actual plastic and not get a decent cut. Alright, I think I've found a solution. So, I've put my smallest annular cutter, in the mag drill. This is 14mm, so it's miles away from the edge. What I'm doing is basically plunging down through the middle to try and deal with the offset original hole. Once I've got that done, I'll put my 16mm down, which will give me my centering hole. Then I'll be able to use the 18. Done. Perfect. You know what, we don't even need to do the 16 because we can just roll with the 18 right now. We've got ourselves a 14mm centering hole. Perfect. Introducing my acrylic window drilling jig. So what I've done, bit of 20mm offcut steel from our anchor that we built. There's a link in the corner if you're curious. This is a 30mm hole that we've just smashed through. What I'm going to do is basically get the acrylic sitting on here. I'll put something nice and soft and lovely on here, but we're going to center it. We don't have to move the drill. We can just, if we need to, we can clamp the acrylic, but also it allows us to drill through without hitting anything underneath. And the mag drill is going to be nice and solid on this, given that it's so thick. Showtime. So, centering bit into a 5.5mm hole. This is the 18mm annular cutter. My plan is to just go around and do that halfway through on all of them, flip it over, and then we'll repeat the process but go right the way through. Once we've got it to this stage, we can then go around with a countersink and just basically clean up all of the edges. Done. They came out pretty good. So this is the underside, so you can sort of see it hasn't burst through any of those, just as we thought it would, like based on our kind of earlier tests. It's obviously got a little bit warm because it's sort of melted some of this white gooey stuff on the inside there. It's obviously a bit hotter than what I probably would have liked, but it doesn't matter. It's perfect for what we need. So I'm going to go through now and countersink them all so that we don't have any edges that are really sharp, and then that one is ready to go. I don't like how that tool cuts. We're going to find a different way of doing that. This is my test piece. It's got a nice 45 chamfer on that. I didn't use the drill press over there. It was a wee bit too aggressive. I wasn't really that comfortable with that one. So we used the router again. Put a 45 in with it only just protruding, buzzed it round, and it seems to be working nice. So I'll do that on this hatch over here, and then we should be ready to start installing this.
Stu had some leftover paint from his boat.
Stu has kindly rocked on up with some paint last thing in the day, and he's throwing some 2-pack. This is the same 2-pack epoxy primer that he's using on his boat. He's mixed up a bit too much, so we're just dumping some on these. We have to paint them, and this was perfect. I was kind of hoping that he would actually mix too much up.
You can always counter me to wrong.
I didn't want to.
Spectacularly in this case.
I didn't want to say anything because then you wouldn't.
Yeah, fair enough.
That turned out really well. Really chuffed for those. Might be a wee bit hard to see on this camera, but nice little 45. It's about maybe a millimetre, possibly 2 millimetres, sort of deep, like across, if that makes sense. The face of the 45. There we go. See it with a wee bit peeled off. Morning. It's Tuesday morning for me, so I have to crack on and get some jobs done before I start work. This morning's job is actually painting out these water tanks. So we're using Jotun 412 tank guard. It's a bloody amazing paint, very, very thick. It's an epoxy, solvent-free epoxy, so it's potable, water safe, etc. What I want to do is set up a little system. I've got this bung here at the bottom of the water tank. I'm setting up my vacuum cleaner to run basically piping air out of the tank, and that way I can keep the fumes to a minimum. I've got new gas masks and everything like that. We're not going to be using scuba or anything along those lines. We don't need to. We can use just a decent 3M gas mask. And we'll also be vacuuming air out via the top, via the 4-inch fan that we have, the extractor fan. It's actually a bilge blower, but it works brilliant for this sort of thing. So yeah, let's press on, get some paint on these tanks. Something that I've found super useful when I'm doing decent amount of painting is plastic tray with these throwaway plastic liners. You've got this ramp that you can, it's got knurls on it, so you can basically put your roller up and down, and then also a bit of a grab handle so that you can, you know, fire it around the boat wherever you need to. But there's sort of holes in it so you can sit your roller. The roller sits perfectly on either side. They're just awesome little things, but mainly because they hold a decent amount of volume. So you can put, you know, up to about here, which I think that worked out to be about 1.5 litres, maybe more, something like that. So you don't have to keep going in and out with little wee containers of your work site. You can just carry a decent amount with you. Awesome little thing.
Because we sandblasted these tanks out fully and then painted them with 3 layers of this Tank Guard 412 a couple of years ago, and they haven't been used for water since then, they've just basically been sitting. The paint looks a bit ratty, but it's actually in great condition. Apart from the areas that we had to fix with the sandblaster, you can sort of see a bit of rust coming through on that baffle just behind me. Everything was in good condition. So this was just a coat going around anywhere that we'd done some work, i.e. cutting ribs off and opened up the paint. In the cofferdam, I also needed to make sure that the rim for each lid had a thorough coating of paint. In this case, I wanted to put 2 coats of Tank Guard 412 on top of it. So we sandblasted all of the old paint off, and using the Tank Guard 412, we were able to use the thickness of the paint to deal with the cuts that we put into that surface of the steel when we were using the saber saw to get the hatches off.
I need to start cutting the holes for the bolts in these nitrile rubber hatches. I've just painted the steel rings, so can't use those, they're out. However, I've got a couple of fuel lids over here, and I've sandwiched one of the black nitrile rubber semi-slick. There we go. I've put a nitrile rubber ring between 2. I'm going to align that up and then just draw around it, and then I can go through with the hole punch set and knock those out. These hatches are a uniform shape, and the bolts are in a uniform sort of location, so it doesn't matter which one we use, they're all the same. We can put any hatch on any lid. They're just a kit you buy when you're building a boat like this. You can just buy these and then weld them straight in, saves you having to build anything. If you've got a lot of punching to do, the easiest way is using a bit of hardwood. Put it on the end grain, put your hole where you need it to be, put your hole punch where it needs to be, and smack it down, and then it should pass cleanly through the end grain. It's a real simple way of keeping not only the punch sharp, but makes the job much faster and easier. There we are, gasketized. So a trick that I use when making gaskets like this, these are 16mm bolts that are going in here. So this hole and this hole here are both 16mm punches, and that allows this rubber to locate on those two, and then the rest are actually 20mm. And the reason I do that is because if I've slightly got this measurement wrong, I don't want the gasket to be either stretched tight or too small and it has to bunch up. I want it to sort of sit naturally and just, you know, without any tension. So by only locating it in 2 places, you pretty much get that, and then the rest can float because you've got this massive sealing ring right the way around this area here. This has been painted with the water tank paint on both sides. We've got a nice thick coat over everything. What I need to do now though is basically sand off. You can see the sort of runs and lumps and bumps. I've got to sand those off so they're nice and flat, because we have to glue this down to the plastic. So I'm going to use a 120 grit so that I get a nice rough surface for the sealant to glue onto. But I also need to clean out these bolt holes so that we don't have any imperfections going through there, so that we can do the alignment when we put it onto the tank, but also make sure that we can actually get the bolts through this through these holes.
So you're in a hurry, well you better calm down. We're all friends around you, just join the fun. 'Cause if you're in a hurry, you're missing the point.
All right, this is looking resplendent. So I've given this is the surface that you're going to see. Given that a 240 grit sand, it's come up nice and smooth and lovely. It's a couple of low spots, but I'm not worried about that. It's going to be buried inside a cofferdam. I'm pretty happy with that. There's no sort of bare seal anywhere, but we've got a nice, you know, sort of lovely surface. We've got a 120 grit sand on that side, so it's pretty coarse, which is good because we want that to have a bit of bite. We're going to start gluing it onto this. Now, a couple of things I need to do in here. So first off, I need to take the plastic protection off this paper layer. That's all got to go. I want to do a rim around here roughed up with some 120 grit as well, just so that there's a bit more texture and able to bite on. It'll hold no matter what, but I just want to give it a bit more oomph. And then I'm going to mask up around the edge and around the inside as well, because I want to make a really crisp, lovely join. So I use this blue painter's tape. It's actually plastic, and you get an incredibly sharp, fine edge on the side. Not many places sell this. It's actually surprisingly hard to get, but it's amazing tape. It's way better than the paper tape. The paper leaves a bit of a fuzzy edge, whereas this leaves an absolutely perfect, crisp line.
Should enjoy the fruits of life instead of chasing coins. Because it's a beautiful day
slight change of plan. I've masked around the edge. You can see that blue line right the way around the sort of halfway up the side. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to bother actually sanding the inside, and I'm also not going to bother taping the inside up. The reason being is because I've done this previously with glass and it worked fine, where you can use a razor blade to cut the tape and get a nice crisp edge. I can't do it with this, it's too soft, so it's going to damage it if I do that. So I don't need to have bucket loads of the sealant on this. I just need to glue the steel to the acrylic so that it holds on enough so that I can bolt it all together. So it's not going to take a huge amount to get that to happen. So I'm going to run a thin bead around that won't squeeze out the side. That's my plan so far. We'll see if it works out that way.
Forget the rush, you're in and find a good spot. Sit down and join us as we sing a good song. Keep back, relax, and just follow along. Oh, we got plenty of time. Taking it easy won't cost you a dime. Throw another log onto the fire. Because oh, it's a beautiful day. And
Once it's to that stage, obviously the sealant's still wet, but you want to pull the blue tape off now while it's wet, and that way you end up with a really crisp line. You wait till it's dry, you end up just ripping it and it turns into a rubbish job. So always do it when it's wet, and then it's just going to peel off nice and beautiful. Because we've changed the design, we've added in some probably 20 something mil, given the thicker gap and the plastic here. We had to get longer bolts. These are stainless Whitworth bolts, BSW bolts. I think they're 1/2 inch BSW. These are the original, just to give you an idea of the difference in length. But these are slightly too long. We actually have to trim 10 mil off these. So we've set up a little jig. Basically, put the bolt in the vise up to the tape line every time, and then slice it off with the cut-off disc just touching the side of the vise. And we're going to have the same length, a nice uniform length every time. So Jess and I have set up a little bit of a production system here. We're going to smash out however many bolts it is, 30 or 40 bolts or something. We'll smash those out, and we can start getting these hatches bolted in.
I wanna close my eyes and go back, play it in my mind. A movie of us two, yeah, we were happy at the time. Can't remember what it felt like. We used to be so strong. That picture perfect sky now, it looks so great cold.
We've got to get rid of these burrs so it doesn't bind up when we put it in. We're using the bench grinder, and it's because the wheel is always going this way, and it's going to push the burrs into the centre, which is what you want.
Feels like when your heart is shaking, when it bleeds. If it's over, just say it out loud. Say those words, go and just shout it out.
These boards, we have painted them up. We've got some non-slip. You might be able to see the gritty, rough sort of complexion of that paint surface. That's an epoxy that Stu put on his deck. We had a bit more left over, so we threw it on these boards. These go inside the cofferdam, and that's what we stand on when we're walking around in the cofferdam. Floorboards out, floorboards in. I've only been waiting 5.5 years to see those floorboards in a room that was tidy enough to put them in. Moment of truth. Let's see if we can actually get this to work.
Yes, that's over now. We've been playing his since 4 a.m. and you haven't said a word to me.
Now that we've got it aligned, international rule of boats, no NECs, no stainless. If you don't know why, have a look at galling on YouTube. I'm sure there's some horrific videos about that. Just a tiny bit, that's all you need. Just enough to get into the threads and stop you having future problems. There we have it, one tank sealed for now. We still need to put some water in this and pressure test it, but I'm going to call that a win. Future plans for this part of the boat inside the cofferdam, we need to get some paint through this whole area. You can see there's bits of bare steel and so on that still need to be dealt with. but we need to get those tanks sorted. We can paint this in the water, but the tanks have to be done in the yard, hence why they were on the priority list. Next job is to seal up the last remaining water tank and the 2 fuel tanks on this side, and we're good to go up here. So this is after hours for Brupeg. We just been scraping the yard of all of our sand because we normally put inches of sand across the whole area. And it all has to go because we're going. While we're down here working, Pushjeff is just basically hanging out with us.
Hey baby. Hey, you're in the middle of things now. Hey, you happy girl. Hmm?